kidneys are super salty because you can only make your urine as concentrated as your medullary pyramid is. So it can only be as salty as your medullary pyramid is. If we didn't make it so our urine had the ability to concentrate, we would die very fast of dehydration. You would have to constantly be drinking water to constantly be peeing out the high volume clear odorless urine just to keep enough water in you to keep your blood pressure high enough. So we have to be able to concentrate our urine. And the way we're able to do that is the top of the pyramid, which is right next to the cortex, is about 300 milliosmoles per kilogram. And that is as salty as the rest of your cells in your body, as the rest of your tissues. And then down at the apex, which is at the bottom, where you exit through your renal papilla, there it's 4 times as salty, up to 1,200 milliosmoles per kilogram. And there's a few different ways that we're able to maintain this gradient of saltiness in the medullary pyramid. First of all, we have a combination of your loop of Henle and your vasa recta, and these run in opposite directions. So vasa recta are the capillaries around your loops of Henle, and they run in opposite directions. As your loop of Henle leaves the medulla, your vasa recta come into the medulla. And then as your loop of Henle comes into the medulla, your vasa recta leaves the medulla. And then I'll get to why that's important. Basically, your vasa recta is there to take water out of your medullary pyramid. And then we recycle about 40 to 60% of your urea. So your kidneys are filled with urea that you don't pee out. Okay, so within the loop of Henle, we do have active transport of things like sodium, potassium chloride out of your filtrate into your kidney. So you're secreting it out, reabsorbing it. And that does a little bit in the loop of Henle. But mostly what happens in the loop of Henle are a bunch of salts go in, and then all the salts just go right back out. And they negate each other. The fact that all these salts go in is equal and opposite to all the salts that go out. But then, in addition to that, a little bit of more sodium, potassium chloride get reabsorbed from your loop of Henle. But not much. Most of that happened in your proximal convoluted tubule. Okay, and then we have your vasa recta will be able to remove water from your loop of Henle. I'll get to the good picture of that in a second. And then once you have when you recycle urea, some of your urea you pee out, and some is then passively reabsorbed and diffused into the medulla of your pyramids, and it stays there. So I have this picture, but I honestly just like this one better. It's the same thing. So this is showing how your loop of Henle runs in one direction, that would be counterclockwise, and your blood flow here runs clockwise. They're opposite. This goes down, that goes up. This goes up, this goes down. We do have a little bit of reabsorption of sodium, potassium chloride into your blood, and that blood is going to then go back to your rest of your body. So you do reabsorb a little bit of those, but most of the other ions just go from your medullary pyramid into the nephron loop and then right back out. But here's the most important part, is that as your filtrate comes down your loop of Henle, the descending loop of Henle is permeable to water, and your vasa recta runs in the opposite direction. And then the ascending loop of Henle is impermeable to water. Water cannot go through it. Because water can't actually go through cell membranes on its own, because water is polar. But what cell membranes have is a receptor that's always open called aquaporin molecules, and water can travel through those. We'll get to those in a little bit. Okay, so water can't enter or exit here. So what ends up happening is as your filtrate comes down, about 15% of your volume of your filtrate gets reabsorbed into your vasa recta, and that vasa recta immediately leaves the medullary pyramid. So that's removing water from the medullary pyramid, help keeping it salty. And then here, even though we're reabsorbing salts, water can't be reabsorbed in the medullary pyramid because this ascending loop of phenylalanine is impermeable to water. That, along with the recycling of urea, where you get urea from protein metabolism, it comes out, you pee some of it out, about half, and the other half you retain and recycle and you keep in your medullary pyramid. And then what we end up with is we reabsorb a little bit more of salts and sugars in your distal convoluted tubule, and then your urine enters your collecting duct at 300 milliosmoles per kilogram. That is your clear, odorless urine. That's as salty as the rest of your body. That's like, it's kind of, that urine is gonna be like has as much stuff, a little bit more than what sweat has. Like it's still salty, but it's not as salty as your body. And remember, your sweat is actually less salty than your body because you reabsorb those salts as the sweat moves up your ducts. Okay, and then, so you're able to reabsorb a little bit more sodium chloride and you are at 300 milliosmoles per kilogram. And then depending on whether or not you have aldosterone and antidiuretic hormone, you reabsorb sodium and or water or you there's a just scratch this paper. Okay. So now the medullary pyramid is super salty because we removed water and we added urea and a little bit of salts. And then the top of the medullary pyramid is equally salted to the rest of the body at 300, and it quadruples up to 1200 at the apex of the medullary pyramid. Then we can either let your urine go out as is, or we can reabsorb salt and or water back into your blood supply. Okay, so these are the mechanisms in which your aldosterone and antidiuretic hormone work. We did talk about aldosterone and antidiuretic hormone back in the endocrine system, but we did not cover these mechanisms yet. So, first we have your renin-angiotensin aldosterone mechanism. So, when your blood pressure is low, your kidneys sense that you have low filtrate flow. Low filtrate flow means you probably have a low level of plasma, so your blood pressure is low. And when you sense low filtrate flow, meaning your blood pressure is low, then your kidneys release renin. Renin goes to a protein that's in your blood produced by your liver that's always there called angiotensinogen, and that gets converted into angiotensin 1. Then angiotensin 1 goes to ACE receptors, angiotensin converting enzymes. Those are found mostly in the lungs, however they are found throughout the rest of your body as well. They are what the COVID spike protein binds to and makes you sick. It's those ACE receptors. The ACE turns angiotensin 1 into angiotensin 2, and that does two things. It makes the blood vessels throughout your body all constrict, and what would that do to your blood pressure? It would make it go up. And then it goes to the cortex of your adrenal gland and makes you release aldosterone. And then aldosterone goes down to your cells in your collecting duct, and it's a lipid-soluble hormone, so it crosses straight through the cell membrane, binds onto intracellular receptors, and then the receptor hormone complex goes to your DNA, binds onto it, makes it unwind, and makes you transcribe your mRNA that's then translated into protein. So a lipid-soluble hormone makes you produce proteins. First you produce mRNA, and then you produce proteins. Back when I did research, whenever I did an experiment where I wanted to look for mRNA, I would treat the drug or the cells with a drug or just do something to the cells, and then I come back between 4 and 8 hours later, typically about 4 to 6 hours later, because I treat them in the morning, and then last thing I do before I leave is isolate the mRNA, and that's like 2 things at the end, and then I get an 8-hour day. So anyway, so 4 to 6 hours, that's a good time to see mRNA production. a good time to see protein production is like 18 to 36 hours later. I would usually just do 24 because it's easy. You treat the cells in the morning, you collect the proteins the next morning. And so my point is, because we have to make mRNA that takes a few hours, then we have to make protein that takes many hours, even up to a day or two. That means this whole mechanism with aldosterone is delayed. So your renin, angiotensin-gin, angiotensin-1, angiotensin-2 mechanism will immediately make your blood vessels constrict. That will have an immediate effect on your blood pressure, make it go up. But the aldosterone part of it, the effect is delayed by about half a day or two, or a day or so. And so what that means is today, if you say you go for a run and you work out a bunch and you sweat a bunch and your blood and you sweat out all your plasma, that's what sweat is. You sweat it out, your blood pressure goes down. What will happen is today you'll release aldosterone, and that means tomorrow you'll retain sodium. And then if you're doing what pretty much every one of you always do, which is awesome, and have water with you at all times, and you're drinking constantly, as long as you're retaining sodium, what will then you also retain? Water. Because the water likes to be around the sodium. And then you'll pee less water out. And then what will happen to your blood pressure? It will go up because your blood volume goes up. So this is a delayed mechanism. It will help you in the future. Like back when I used to chop wood, I would sometimes lose 10 pounds in sweat a day because I'd move like 5,000 pounds of wood 3 separate times and hand cut it and everything. And then the next few days, I would drink water, and my urine would be dark, almost like dark yellow, like almost brown like color, because I'm so dehydrated. And I'd keep on drinking water, and I wouldn't pee. What would happen? All that water would go into my blood, and then get redistributed back out to my tissues, because you have that fluid shift that can go from your tissues into your blood, and then from your blood into your sweat. So, okay, so this mechanism is delayed because it's a lipid-soluble hormone. Oh, and what does it do? Sorry, I forgot. Actually, what does it do is you have your sodium-potassium exchange pump running constantly, and so that's creating a sodium gradient. And then what you do, when you have aldosterone, you make these sodium, hydrogen, and sodium-potassium antiporters, and then they go into the cell membrane. So this sodium-potassium exchange pump exists in every cell at all times. But these green ones down here, the sodium hydrogen exchanger and the sodium-potassium antiporter, those are the ones that are produced in response to aldosterone. So once you have aldosterone present, the next day you'll exchange, you'll take in sodium from your filtrate and add acid, add hydrogen ions. You'll take in sodium from your filtrate and you'll add potassium ions. So this does make you pee out more hydrogen, potassium, but those are things that you actively secrete normally anyways. And then you reabsorb sodium, and then once sodium gets into the cell, it then goes into your interstitial spaces, then out into your blood. So long story short, you're making these antiporters. And so that will take a day for them to be produced, and then they're gonna live in your cell membrane for at least a few days. So then for the next few days, as long as you're drinking water, your blood pressure will go up. Okay. Now, antidiuretic hormone is released from your, posterior pituitary. Antidiuretic hormone makes you not pee. So one of the few things I actually remember from high school anatomy was us learning about this. So think of what a diuretic is. Diuretics are things like caffeine, alcohol, things that make you pee. And so antidiuretic hormone makes you not pee. It makes you pee less or lower volume. And so your antidiuretic hormone is released from it's actually really released from your hypothalamus, because the cell body that senses, it gets a signal that you have low blood pressure is in the hypothalamus, then it sends its axon down to the posterior pituitary that then synapses with the capillary bed. So it's really the hypothalamus controlling this. Hypothalamus will release antidiuretic hormone into the posterior pituitary, and antidiuretic hormone is water soluble. So it cannot cross through the cell membrane. So it will bind onto your G protein coupled receptors, which are membrane-bound receptors. And when you activate these G protein coupled receptors, you activate G proteins. And then the activated G protein can do a bunch of different things. In this case, it activates an enzyme called adenylate cyclase that converts ATP into cyclic AMP, which is used as a signaling molecule. And that all happens within fractions of a second. And then what it causes is it causes vesicles that already exist, that already have aquaporin 2 molecules in it, to fuse with the cell membrane facing the filtrate. That's an apical membrane. The basal membrane facing your interstitial space by your capillaries, that always has aquaporin 3 or 4 molecules. They're always present, like the vast majority of your cells in your body always have aquaporin on it. It's just your ascending loop epithely and your collecting duct don't. So we have to add them in. And so when you then add these aquaporin molecules in to the cell membrane facing the filtrate, and actually now it's urine, because we're in the collecting duct, so it's actually urine. Now it's dilute urine. And so then what you're going to do is add the aquaporin 2 molecules in here, and then water will undergo simple diffusion, which is osmosis, where water goes from high concentration water to low concentration. So you are then able to reabsorb water. And if you combine this with aldosterone, if you're retaining more sodium, you're going to retain even more water, because the water follows the sodium. So these mechanisms work together. But your aldosterone mechanism is you're gonna respond to this within less than a second once a hormone gets down to your body. So really, and how long is it gonna take a hormone to get down to your kidneys? It will take about a minute. So really, this response is gonna happen within a time range of 1 to 2 minutes. So you're dehydrated, and you're gonna start to retain water and remove water back in. So right now, like, if you're just sitting inside all day long and you're drinking water, like a bunch of water all day long, you're gonna go pee the high volume, clear, odorless urine. But what if you go out in the heat of the summer and start working all day long outside and working hard, and it's hot, and you're sweating quickly, your blood pressure will plummet, you'll release antidiuretic hormone, and you'll not produce more urine. So then you're only losing water through sweat instead of through urine. And then as long as you're drinking water, you'll be fine. So when you are fully hydrated, like you should always be, what happens is you have plenty of water in your blood, so your blood pressure is high enough, so you do not release antidiuretic hormone or aldosterone, so you can't reabsorb the water, so the water just gets all peed out. When you are dehydrated and you have low blood pressure, then you release antidiuretic hormone that adds aquaporin molecules to the cell membranes to allow you to reabsorb water, and you do. And you concentrate your urine up to 1,200 milliosmoles per kilogram, which is, that number's meaningless, but it's like 4 times as salty as your average cell. Okay, a couple of other hormones are produced. Your right atrium produces a hormone called atrial natriuretic hormone when it's stretched out too much. So like, when's a really common time for way too much blood to go to your right atrium all at once? When you go from standing up to laying down. And then your body doesn't have to fight gravity anymore, so all that blood that was pooled in your legs now suddenly comes flying back up to your heart. And that way stretches out your right atrium way too much. That's the easiest example of when that can happen. There are others. So what will happen is the right atrium will get stretched too much, it'll release atrial natriuretic hormone, and that makes you inhibit your sodium reabsorption, so you pee more sodium out, inhibit antidiuretic hormone production, so you can't reabsorb the water, and so you pee out sodium and water follows the sodium. So you get an increased volume of urine produced, and then when you are peeing out more urine, that urine literally came from the plasma of your blood. So your blood volume will go down, and your blood pressure will then go down, and so less blood will flow back to your right atrium. Okay, now we can do things to look at how efficient your kidneys are. So your kidneys do have a tubular maximum. That's the maximum amount of stuff they can reabsorb, and we can measure it using plasma clearance. We give you a drug, a marker of some sort, either PAH, which is para-aminohippuric acid, or another one, and it's called inulin, and there's others, and those drugs, you consume them, they go into your body, and then you pee them out, and they collect your urine and see how quickly you pee them out. Okay, and then tubular load is the total amount of substances that pass through the filtration membrane each minute. And then you're gonna have a tubular maximum, which is the amount you can reabsorb. So, there is only gonna be a certain number of receptors that can reabsorb certain things, like sodium, or an amino acid, or glucose. And what will happen, and you do even have microvilli on your proximal convolutubular cells. There's a lot of surface area, a lot of these receptors. However, sometimes there's just not enough. So like in this, if there's a fire in this room, how long would it take us to escape? All of us, less than 5 seconds out that one door? What if we packed in 200 people in your shoulder to shoulder? How long would that take? It would take a long time, and people would not escape. That's what happens at like dance club flat fires. Is there's too many people, there's a fire, and they all try to go through the exits that are too small, and then people get trampled and they get killed, and they die from smoke inhalation. So normally we have plenty of receptors that we can reabsorb all the glucose that normally makes it into your filtrate, because the amount of glucose that makes it into your filtrate will be roughly equal to the amount of glucose you have in your blood, because then it just moves straight from your plasma into your filtrate. But then if you're diabetic, you're gonna either not have enough insulin, or you have multiple mechanisms that cause you to have too much blood sugar, or your insulin receptors don't work, or something doesn't work, and your blood sugar levels are too high. You're gonna reach a point where you reach your tubular maximum, where your kidneys are finally starting to not be able to keep up. Until you reach your tubular maximum, you can keep up, and you can reabsorb all that sugar, and you won't be peeing out sugar. So, but then once you exceed that amount, and your blood sugar levels are too high, then you don't have enough receptors or doorways to reabsorb it all in time. And then what ends up happening is you do pee out sugar. And then what does water like to do? Think about juicy juice. Water likes to be around the sugar. So in this case, the water's in your urine, the sugar's in your urine, so your water stays where the sugar is, which is in your urine, and then you pee more out. So that even the word diabetes mellitus actually refers to excess urine production, excess pee. And then you're peeing more because you have high glucose levels, and there's too much glucose in your urine. There should be no glucose in your urine ever, but if there is, then you're pre-diabetic or diabetic, and then you pee out more. And then once you pee out a bunch, you're constantly thirsty and constantly drink a lot of water. So that's a big sign if you're diabetic, is if you're constantly thirsty, constantly peeing, and constantly drinking because you're thirsty, you might be pre-diabetic or even diabetic. The other one is your urine should never ever smell sweet. So I mean, it smells like, what does it smell like after drinking coffee? It smells like coffee. What does it smell like after asparagus? It smells like asparagus. So I mean, it can quickly smell like things. It just should never ever smell sweet. If it smells sweet, you do have sugar in it, and if you have sugar in it, you're at least pre-diabetic. So that's it. Our urine is moved through the nephron, is moved through the hydrostatic pressure caused by the small efferent arteriole and large afferent arteriole. But then once it gets to your ureters, then your peristaltic contractions take over, just like in your digestive system, where smooth muscles relax in front of the urine and squeeze behind it. And these peristaltic contractions move urine from your kidneys down to your bladder, and they happen once every few seconds when you have a lot of water, you're producing a lot of urine, down to once every 2 or 3 minutes when you're dehydrated and you're not producing that much urine. Your parasympathetic nervous system, your resting state conditions, increases the amount of peristaltic contractions you have. And your sympathetic nervous system, a flight or flight response, reduces the amount of peristaltic contractions you have because it cuts off blood supply to your kidneys anyways, so you're not producing much urine in the first place. So there's no urine to move, and so the peristaltic contractions slow down. And then your ureters go down, and they go down to the back bottom side of your bladder. Quickly, for those who came in a little bit later, I do have a scratched piece of paper right up there. Your quiz question, or your quiz today, is to write a quiz question based on the urinary system. And that will be your quiz on Monday next week, because we do not have class on Wednesday, because it's Thanksgiving. Thank goodness. I need it. So, very much so. Okay, so your ureters are a very, very simple organ. You have a transitional epithelium on the bottom. Remember, transitional epitheliums can stretch, go from cuboidal to more squamous. And then underneath that, you have lamina propria. And then you have smooth muscles that cause a peristaltic contraction. And then you have your outer connective tissue. And then your ureters enter your bladder at the back bottom side. So here's your bladder. I was pointing at the bladder. Here's ureters. This is the same setup. You have transitional epithelium, smooth muscle, and connective tissue. Bladder, same thing. Transitional epithelium, connective tissue, smooth muscles, more connective tissue. Your bladder also has big like wrinkles in it called rugae, just like your stomach. So your stomach and your bladder have rugae, and your gallbladder have rugae, so they can stretch out without ripping open. Because the folds, just like if this is all bunched together and then you stretch it out and it becomes flat, you can increase the surface area. But that's not, you don't want more surface area, you just want more volume that can hold. Okay, and then at the bottom of your bladder, you have an area that's shaped like a triangle, and the three corners are the two openings for your two ureters and the one opening for your urethra. Together, this area, this triangle-shaped area, is called a trigon, and this trigon is the only part of your bladder that's not stretchy, and there's no rugae. So, or it's at least the least stretchy part of your bladder is the trigon. The rest of your bladder can stretch out a bunch. Okay, and then your bladder on the outside has a muscle called the detrusor muscle, right here, detrusor muscle. And that, when triggered, will contract and make you urinate. That's really it for the bladder. That's it, anatomy-wise. So, these three are all male, and this is the female bladder. Male and female bladders are the exact same and can hold the exact same amount of urine, except for what you women have sitting on top of their bladder is their uterus. So even in a non-pregnant woman, your uterus is almost always still resting on top of your bladder. I did just see recently a woman had a uterus that went backwards. It's rare, but it happens, but usually it goes forward and it sits on top of your bladder. So, okay. So bladder in general, between male and female, it's the exact same. We have on the outside your detrusor muscle that makes you urinate. You have rugae in your mucous membrane, which is made up of transitional epithelium. And then you have your trigon, made of your two openings for your ureters and your one opening for your urethra. In the woman, it's the exact same as the man. Okay. There's no differences at all in the bladder. There are differences in the urethra. And in this case, it's probably the only example where women are simpler. So, is the urethra. In general, women, anatomy, physiology-wise, it's more complex because of childbirth and things. So, in a woman, their urethra just goes straight from the bladder down to your vestibule. No, that's between labia and minora. Vestible's labia and majora. In the vestibule, area between your labia and majora. And it's between the clitoris and the vaginal orifice is the external urethral sphincter. And the external urethral orifice. And there's really nothing. It is urethra, and as a woman, just a straight tube that goes down about an inch, and then you pee out. It's but then there's a mucous membrane along it to keep it lubricated. Not super important in women, more important for men. And then there are two sphincters. There's an internal urethral sphincter in women that's made up of smooth muscles that basically does nothing. It's completely useless. The only reason you have it is because if you would have become a man, you would have needed it. So, but you don't really need it. Anytime that you're ready to urinate, it really just relaxes and it doesn't do anything. It has a role in men. I'll get to the role in men in a second. And then your external urethral sphincter, you can be very happy that you still have control of it. It's because that's what keeps you continent. It's made up of skeletal muscles, and the only way to urinate is to make that relax. And then you can constrict your detrusor muscle and urine comes out. Okay. In a male urethra, it's a lot different because it's longer, because it goes not just out the body, but then also it goes out through the entire penis. So, and your male urethra is divided into three parts. The female urethra is not, it's just a urethra. The male urethra, the first part that's housed inside of the prostate gland, is the prostatic urethra. The next section of urethra, shown right here, is the urethra as it passes through your urogenital diaphragm or urogenital floor, as it passes through your external urethral sphincter. That's called the membranous urethra. And we're talking a couple millimeters long, not very long. And then the rest of the urethra goes to the penis, so it's called the penile urethra, or the specific portion of the penis it goes to is the corpus spongiosum, so it's also called the spongy urethra. Penile urethra or spongy urethra go through the corpus spongiosum of the penis. Now, for men, still, the external urethral sphincter is what keeps us continent. It what makes it so we don't pee our pants. It's what you have to relax. Like if you ever get stage fright when you go to pee in public and you just can't do it, that's because your external urethral sphincter is still closed, because that's actually controlled by your spinal cord, not your brain. Your brain, you can't decide that you want to pee. Your spinal cord decides that. So you can allow your spinal cord to make decisions, but the spinal cord actually makes the decision. So, just like defecation, same thing. That's true too. But here's what the internal urethral sphincter does. The internal urethral sphincter constricts when a guy has emissions. Okay, so what will happen with a guy when he gets aroused is first he gets an erection. Your internal urethral sphincter can be open during erection. This is where I got pissed off at my 8th grade health science teacher. First of all, he called me a bump on the log to my mom during a parent-teacher conference because I already knew everything. My parents taught me all of it. So I wasn't learning anything, so I just was sitting there not paying attention. And so, because he wasn't teaching me anything. And then the one thing he taught me was incorrect. He said that anytime a guy has a erection, the internal urethral sphincter is closed. That's not true. A guy can urinate with an erection. It's completely possible. So he was wrong. Here's what it does, is a guy will get an erection, and then when he's close to orgasming, close to having an ejaculation, he'll form emissions. Emissions are a collection of sperm from the testicles, seminal fluid from your seminal vesicles, and prostatic fluid from the prostate. And these all build up inside your prostate and get stored for a few minutes until the guy finally ejaculates. So here you have 95% of your ejaculate is stored in your prostate gland, and during that time, it's called emissions. During that time that you have emissions in your prostatic urethra, your internal urethral sphincter constricts, and what that does is it prevents urine from contaminating your emissions, because urine is acidic, and acid kills sperm. So if you have urine mixing with a sperm as a man, then that's one of the many reasons that a guy can be less fertile. Because if his urine is killing a sperm, they're going to be dead and not going to impregnate a woman. And so that's why you have an internal urethral sphincter, is so a man's emissions don't get contaminated. with urine. Since women don't have that, then you don't have emissions, you don't need an internal urethral sphincter. Okay, that's it. So here's cross-section of your ureter. You have your transitional epithelium, obloba mucosa, your muscularis layer that has peristaltic contractions, and then your connective tissue on the outside. Your bladder itself, you have your transitional epithelium on the outside. Underneath that, lamina propria and some mucosa, submucosa. And then you have your detrusor muscle, which is a large, smooth muscle that makes you urinate. So here's a bladder on a woman and on a man. The bladder is the exact same, in the same position, but in a woman, her uterus is usually sitting on top. In a pregnant woman, her uterus completely crushes the bladder. Yeah, and then urethra, I already said all this stuff, so it's just right down to you. So here on a man, just women really quickly, you have, here women, you just have urethra, go down here, internal urethral sphincter, and external urethral sphincter, right there. And then a guy, you have bladder, prostate. Within the prostate, you have your prostatic urethra. Within your external urethral sphincter, you have your membranous urethra. Internal urethral sphincter between the bladder and the prostate. And then you have your spongy or penile urethra going out the corpus spongiosum of the penis. In a woman, you have bladder, urethra, internal urethral orifice, external urethral orifice with sphincters around them. Really, these are the sphincters, because that's the orifice, and that's orifice. That's a typo. These are sphincters. Okay, so now, I think this last three slides. So, good thing we'll finish this today. And start again on the reproductive system. Okay, so, your urination reflex is called the micturition reflex, and just like the defecation reflex, it's going to be different before you turn 1 and after you turn 1. So before you turn 1, what happens is as soon as urine enters the bladder and it stretches it out enough, then what will happen is you'll get stretch signals. Those stretch signals will send information to your lumbar portion of your spinal cord. That will activate your parasympathetic nervous system to make you relax, do two things: relax your external urethral sphincter and constrict your detrusor muscle, and then you pee automatically. Before you turn 1, you also don't know you have the sensation of you have to pee. Like your brain doesn't comprehend it. Around when you turn 1, you develop signals that are sensory signals that go up to your brain being like, oh, that feeling means I could go pee now. Oh, that feeling means I should go pee now. Oh, that feeling means that if I don't go pee now, I'm gonna pee my pants. You get the difference in those feelings and understanding what they mean. And then you start to send inhibitory signals down, and you inhibit this automatic reflex. You constantly are inhibiting this automatic reflex, and then you get to the point where you're ready to pee, and what you do as a guy, you just go wherever, and a girl, you go sit down in a toilet or you squat, and what happens is you just shut off that inhibitory signal. You tell your brain to stop inhibiting your spinal cord, but your spinal cord still has to take over and allow the automatic reflex to actually occur. When it occurs, the stretching of the bladder will cause you to constrict your detrusor muscle and relax your external urethral sphincter. And then you pee automatically. So, and then once you turn 1, then you start to sense that feeling, and you start to constantly send down inhibitory signals to your lumbar spinal cord, and you inhibit it all the time. Even when you want to pee, sometimes you can't. So, I'm going to tell you three stories. One about me, 2 about other people. But before I go over that, I want to go over volumes. So, your ability to control your urine is at 1. All right, you started at 1, but normally kids don't really get potty trained until like 2 or as late as 3-ish. Like before you send your kid to preschool, they have to be potty trained. So our son went to preschool at 3, so we gotta make sure he's fully PI trained. Right? So, and then kids will be PI trained earlier if they have like siblings who are older or other kids in daycare who are going to the bathroom just like a little older than them. They'll see it and they'll figure out what to do. So, but you can start doing it at 1. Okay, so after you urinate, your bladder's almost completely empty, and then your urine starts to fill up your bladder. You can hold up to 300 milliliters and have almost no urge to pee at all. So, how much is in that bottle there?
500.
500 milliliters? Okay, so 3/5 of that you can hold. So basically what's in there right now, you can hold that much urine without even thinking you need to pee. And then when you get to about to 400, which is a little bit more, I'd say up to the top of the blue label on this water bottle, that's when you're like, oh, I could pee. And like if you're about to like go sit down in class for an hour, you'll probably go pee in red time. If you're gonna go for an hour-long drive, you're gonna probably go pee ahead of time. And then it fills up a little bit more to get that much, half a liter, and that's when you start to get the discomfort where if you're at home, you pee. If you're at work and you can leave your work, you go pee. It's discomforting, so normally in that situation, you go pee. But what if you can't? Well, if you're working and you just can't make it there or something's going on, you can't pee, then your bladder keeps on filling up, but it's only half full. It can hold a full liter before you actually have to urinate. So you can fill up that bottle twice with your urine if it's completely full. So here's 3 stories. First one's about me. So I had a very painful surgery. I think I told you about it, where I had a huge abscess and I got drained. So anyways, very painful. I did not want to get up and go to the bathroom. So I was like, okay. I'm like, maybe I can pee while laying down. Nope, because what have I trained myself my entire life to never, ever, ever do? Pee while you're laying down sleeping. And so your body, you train yourself not to allow it to happen. I'm like, okay, my body's not gonna let me do this. So then what I did is like, okay, well, as a guy, we sit on the toilet to poop. And when we do that every time we pee, so I should be able to sit on the edge of the bed and pee. I tried that and I couldn't get my brain to let me do that. I could not pee. So every time I peed, I had to get up and stand up. And it was painful and not fun. But it's the only way I could get myself to actually pee. Well, here's the embarrassing part, is they're pumping you full of fluids with your IV, and so what are you constantly doing? You're constantly peeing, and then what do the nurses have to do? They have to keep track of fluids in versus fluids out. So whenever you pee, you have to pee into a container, so they can keep track of how much you actually pee out. Well, since a human bladder can only hold 1 liter of urine, what do you think the top, very, very top mark was on the bottle they gave me? Exactly 1 liter, right at the brim. Well, yeah, I'm sorry, but my bladder, I found out I can hold about 1.2 liters. So I got to the brim, and it wasn't stopping. And you know how you can stop peeing, but it's not pleasant. Well, I didn't want to constrict my external urethral sphincter, where I just had surgery on my external anal sphincter, so I didn't want to cut off the pee, so I just peed on the floor in the hotel room. And not hotel room, hospital room. I felt really bad. I had to apologize a bunch to the nurse to have to clean it up. I felt awful. So that's my story with that. Okay, so then 2 more stories is what's happened sometimes in certain situations where people's brains basically just shut down. They then, if their brain shuts down and their bladder's full, their spinal cord will take over and they'll pee their pants. So here's my 2 stories about other people peeing their pants when they're drunk. So, I'll do this quick. When my sister was 21, she had a party at my parents' house, and my parents were there. They were upstairs sleeping, but we were in the basement. And she had permission, so she was 21, I was 14. My friend and I were there for the party as well. But here's where my sister made a mistake. She was at the Pawnee bar, and she just announced to the entire bar, after bar party in my house. So not only was it friends coming over, but it was randos coming over too. So all these random people were there. We got like multiple $100s worth of cash stolen from the house. Someone made a long-distance call that almost stole our cordless phone, but then ended up leaving it behind. Almost stole my mom's coat, but got caught by my sister. A bunch of crap happened. And then we were at the end of the basement, and one of the living rooms playing drinking games, card games. I was not drinking, I was 14. My friend was 14, we were not drinking, but we were playing the card games. And then we were doing that, and then we went over to the other end, which had the pool table, and we saw a guy pass out on the ground. And they were responsible drunk people, so what should you do if someone's passed out drunk on the ground? Roll them onto their sides or stomach, but preferably sides, just not on their back, because what happens, they throw up and then they choke. So they did that, and then we went back to the other end of the basement playing cards, and half hour we went back later and we found him. He got up and he was spread on top of the pool table, and we rolled him over, and there we could see it, a line of his waist going down to his legs, then back up to his crotch of the urine that he peed his pants on our pool table. And then of course, who had to clean it up? The 14-year-old brother I did. So whenever I have a party, I make sure to have someone put their hand on that part of the pool table when I say it. I haven't had a party at that house for like 15 years, but used to. Anyways, other one is, this one's worse. So there was a guy on my floor in my dorm room, or not dorm, but dorm floor. He had a different dorm room on my floor. And he was a raging alcoholic. Like, he would drink every single night of the week, and he'd get blackout drunk every night of the week at like 19. And so what would happen is almost every night of the week, he would pee his pants, piss the bed while he was sleeping. And so he had both. He had rubber sheets on the bottom, and then on top of that, he had plastic sheets. So he had so he just peed because he knew it was gonna happen. And he went through roommate after roommate after roommate before they stopped assigning roommates. And what we never understood is, why did he always insist on sleeping in the top bunk? Raining down on the roommates almost every night. And how did he even get up onto the top bunk in the first place? I do not understand that. If you're so drunk to pee your pants, how could you climb up there? I never understood that. I don't know what happened to that guy in life, but I'm assuming it's not good. So, okay, video of this.
Nutrition reflex involves impulses traveling from the urinary bladder to the sacral region of the spinal cord, and from the sacral region of the spinal cord back to the bladder. It is coordinated by neurons in the spinal cord and can be influenced by signals from the brain. When the urinary bladder becomes stretched, there is an increase in the frequency of action potentials carried from the bladder wall to the sacral region of the spinal cord. In response, parasympathetic neurons from the spinal cord to the bladder are activated, and this causes the smooth muscle on the bladder wall to contract. The sensory signals to the sacral region of the spinal cord also stimulate ascending pathways to the pons and cerebrum, which results in a conscious desire to urinate. If urination is not convenient at the time, the brain sends impulses down the spinal cord to inhibit the micturition reflex. Impulses carried via somatic motor neurons keep the external urinary sphincter contracted, which also prevents urination. When urination is desired, signals from the brain stimulate the micturition reflex. The brain also decreases action potentials in the somatic motor neurons to relax the external urinary sphincter.
Okay, so then, last slide for this chapter, is then what happens as we get older with our kidneys. Your kidneys decrease in size, and they get less nephrons, but it doesn't really matter, because as a young adult, you guys right now, you have 6 times as much kidneys as you need. So you really only need 1/3 of one of your kidneys. Hence, what's one of the organs we can actually donate while we're living is a kidney. Because if you donate a kidney, you still have 3 times as much kidneys as you need. So for most people, it's not going to be a big deal your entire life. Most people don't die from kidney disease. You can, but most people don't. The amount of blood flowing decreases because the amount of blood flow to every single organ decreases when you get older. So if you get less blood flowing to your kidneys, you're going to get less urine production. You get a smaller number of glomeruli, meaning, and also less nephrons, and your glomeruli can't reabsorb or secrete as well. So you're going to be peeing out more salts and more sugars. And then what will water do? Water will fall along with it. And then that's because you're not reabsorbing those salts and sugars, but also you can't secrete as many things. So when you do take the ibuprofen or the penicillin, your body's not going to secrete it out as quickly as it would if you're younger. So it stays around inside you longer. You'll still secrete it out. It'll just take longer. Not much. Not a big amount for that. And your ability to concentrate urine declines because you're peeing out too much sodium and sugar, and water follows the sodium and sugar. And then you become dehydrated easier because you're peeing too much, so you have to drink a lot of water. And then you also have other things like a less production of vitamin D, so you have less calcium in your blood, and you can have increased risk of osteoporosis and bone fractures because of less calcium, because you have less vitamin D, so you're not absorbing as much from your food. Like that. Okay, so now we'll start in on the reproductive system. We have 2 more chapters. We have reproductive system, male and female, and then we have growth and development, which includes fertilization and stuff. So it's gonna sometimes see when we're gonna just get to fertilization, and it would seem like we should keep on going, but we're gonna stop in this chapter, because we'll continue in the next chapter. And we have 20 minutes left. So, now the functions of your reproductive system, first of all, are to produce our gametes. Reproduce our gametes so we can reproduce. The female sex, they produce the larger gamete, and the male sex produces the smaller gamete. And that's true across all organisms that produce gametes. So, in women, they are women because they produce eggs. They are men because they produce sperm. That's the most basic biological definition of sex. But then, think about this. Are all women even born with ovaries? They are not. Are all men born with testicles? They are not. Some people have neither testicles or ovaries. So things get all messed up. By the most fundamental definition is you're a woman if you produce eggs, you're a man if you produce sperm. But obviously that doesn't say that if you get your ovaries removed because you have cancer or something, you're suddenly not a woman. But that's just like the most basic definition. Okay, and then we have to have fertilization. So your sperm has to then fertilize the egg. In this, you have a very small window for this to be successful. Your sperm must fertilize the egg within 24 hours after ovulation to have a successful pregnancy. If you fertilize the egg after 24 hours, very quickly your chance of successful pregnancies go down. So say you have sex like 3 or 4 days after you ovulate, your egg can still get fertilized, but it will not become a baby. It will not fully develop. So, and then you can also have sex 6 days before you ovulate, because sperm can live in the vagina for up to 6 days. You ovulate, then they swim up your vagina, up your uterus and fertilize you. So there's really like a 7-day window of chance where you can get pregnant. Beyond that, you can still get a fertilized egg, you can still get a zygote and an embryonic body, but you'll never get a fully formed embryo because it won't attach fully. Okay? And then once you get a embryo, the embryo must attach to the uterine wall, and then the uterine wall will help nourish the developing embryo and then fetus until it's ready to be born. And it not only provides blood supply, which is oxygen nutrient supply, and it also takes waste products away, but your placenta also takes over the hormone production for the second half of pregnancy that maintains your pregnancy. And then production of hormones. So in men, we get hormones from the testicles. In women, you get hormones from your developing follicles, then your corpus luteum, then your placenta at different times of your month and different times of your pregnancy. And we'll go through that in details finally this chapter. Okay, so we're going to start with male reproductive system first, and then female reproductive system. So starting on the outside, we have your scrotum. Your scrotum is a 2-chambered sac, and in each one of the chambers is 1 testicle. And your scrotum is divided by that line that runs down the scrotum called the raphe. So that line running down there is the raphe. It even goes all the way down the perineum, which we refer to as the taint, and at least I did when we were growing up. That's what guys called it. But in the perineum here, that line that runs down there is literally the same thing as a woman's labia minora that fuse together. Okay, and then in your scrotum, there are 2 sets of muscles. You have a dartos muscle and cremaster muscle. The cremaster muscle allows your testicles to go up when you're cold and descend when you're hot. Because a guy's testicles must be like 2 to 3 degrees Celsius lower than body temperature to have a successful pregnancy, successful sperm production. So if you have an undescended testicle, you'll still produce testosterone like normal, you just won't have successful sperm production. They won't be motile, they won't be movable, you won't have flagella to whip around a bunch. You'll have flagella, they just won't whip around. So when a guy's hot, the cremaster muscle relaxes and the testicles hang down. And then when he's cold, like getting out of a pool, they go up and they go up right next to his body. And then the dartos muscle, what that does is it makes the scrotum wrinkle. So it wrinkles, and then what it does is when your cremaster muscle lifts up, it pushes your testicles right by your body, and then your dartos muscle makes the scrotum become wrinkly, and it pushes your testicles even up further into your body. I always think about this funny story when this happens. It's about a dog, but my brother and sister-in-law, they always have Vizslas, those orange hunting dogs, and one time they bred 2 of them. And so one time when they were getting ready to breed, the dogs started at it in the living room, and my brother-in-law would just bust out laughing because at the end when Copper was done, he could tell because his cremaster muscle lifted his testicles up and his dartos muscle pushed him in. So he was like, his balls disappeared. Like it just completely went up inside his body. And that happens anytime a guy ejaculates. Your testicles will go up and your dartos muscle will push up, and that is one of the things that then triggers ejaculation. So it's involved in both ejaculation and keeping your testicles at the appropriate temperature to have good sperm production. Your perineum is this entire area down here, and it's divided into 2 triangles. This is your urogenital triangle, and this is the anal triangle. Honestly, a guy will never deal with his perineum like ever in his life. It's just not a part of something we think about. Women, you will have to think about your perineum because you might choose to get an episiotomy. That's where they cut your vagina before you have a baby, so that if you do tear, it's a cleaner tear. So, and if you don't get an episiotomy, you can tear, and you can tear through your perineum. So that's something for you to discuss with your obstetrician when you get to that stage. Okay, now here's the internal structure of the male reproductive system. Starting down here, we have your scrotum with your cremaster and dartos muscle, and then there's your 2 testicles. So here's one testicle, and then the other one would be behind. Testicle produces testosterone, and it's where sperm are produced. And then sperm go into the epididymis here on top of the testicle. The epididymis are where sperm are stored for a couple days, like 1 or 2 days, where they get a chance to mature. And when they mature, they become more motile or more movable, and their flagella whip around more. So they can swim up the vagina and up the uterus and fallopian tube. Okay, then from your epididymis, you have your ductus deferens. I learned it as vas deferens a long time ago. They're both correct. So your vas deferens or ductus deferens goes up, goes around behind the bladder, and your vas deferens or ductus deferens fuses together with the seminal vesicle to form the little ampulla, and then you have 2 ejaculatory ducts, one from each seminal vesicle and fast reference, that goes through the prostate. So the ejaculatory ducts bring both the sperm and your seminal fluids through the prostate into the prostatic urethra to be stored as emissions. And then here's your prostate that surrounds your prostatic urethra. Your prostate also makes prostatic fluid that contributes to your emissions, about 60% of the emissions. Or no, is that seminal vesicles? Oh, I forget the numbers. One's like 5, 35. I'm not remember the numbers exactly right now. So that's a prostate gland. Then you have your urethra, prostatic urethra, membranous urethra, spongy or penile urethra. And then there's one more accessory gland called the bulbar urethral gland or Cowper's gland that makes you pre-ejaculate. The pre-ejaculate is the stuff that comes out a few minutes before a guy ejaculates. So we'll get to that in a bit. And then you have the penis itself that has 3 tubes. On the bottom is a single tube called the corpus spongiosum. Inside the body enlarges to form the bulb. And out at the end enlarges to form the glans penis or head of the penis. And then you have your 2 corpus cavernosa. There's one on each side on the top. You can just see one here. Inside the body, it veers off to either side, veers off to form the crust of the penis. And then the glans penis or head of the penis is surrounded by the prepuce or foreskin. So here you have your corpus spongiosum. Really, this orange should be highlighted here and here as well, because that's all corpus spongiosum. This plus the orange plus that is all corpus spongiosum. Specifically, this is the bulb of the corpus spongiosum where it enlarges. See, it enlarges right at the end there, skinnier and enlarges. And then on the top of the penis, there's 2 tubes called your corpus cavernosa, and these veer off to either side to form the crust of the penis. And together, the bulb of the penis and the crust of the penis are like a third of the penis is inside the body. And then what it does is by having the penis inside the body, it's more rigid. It's not like floppy. Like it's actually anchored, and so it makes it so penis can go in easier, and it won't like bend and break as much, which can happen. These crust and corpus cavernosum can explode if it's bent. Okay. So here's the whole penis. Notice a large portion's inside, the rest outside the body. This is the whole corpus spongiosum, finally highlighted correctly here. The corpus spongiosum enlarges on the end to form the glans penis or head of the penis, and inside the body enlarges to form the bulb. And then the corpus cavernosa should be actually this plus this, all this orange part on top. That's the corpus cavernosa. Inside the body, it's the crust, and it veers off to the sides, acting as an anchor to hold the penis erect. Okay, now to your testicle. So, your testicle on the very outside, it does have a thick connective tissue membrane called the tunica albuginea. Okay, and then what happens is that tunica albuginea extends into your testicle to form these little divisions called septa. And these septa go in and they divide your testicle into these openings called lobules. And then each lobule has a bunch of seminiferous tubules all interwound within it. The seminiferous tubules are what produce your sperm. And then in between the seminiferous tubules, so like here, are Leydig cells, and Leydig cells or interstitial cells produce testosterone. Okay? And then, once the sperm are produced in the seminiferous tubules, the sperm move through these tubes called tubulus rectus. Remember what rectus means? It means straight. So these running in a straight line. To the recti testes, this interconnected network of tubes, to the efferent ductules that take the sperm to the epididymis. Then the sperm gets stored in the epididymis. They mature in the head and body and then get stored in the tail of the epididymis, and they mature for like a day or two, and then gonna get stored until the guy ejaculates. And then it leads to the ductus deferens or vas deferens. So here you can see the septa dividing your testicle into different lobules, and each lobule is filled with seminiferous tubules. And looking at this picture, like, I have not had mountain oysters, but I've been curious about it, because like 2 summers ago, we spent a bunch of time at Mahoney, and the restaurant right outside Mahoney State Park is one where they have the testicle festival. And so I kept on having them there and kept on maybe wanting to try one. I just can't, because I have a texture issue, like a sensory issue, and I just am worried about the texture of that. That's like cow testicles. I've never had one. But then looking at this texture, I don't think I can. So, okay. So now, when you are developing, your testicles start out way high up in their abdomen, because your testicles and your ovaries both start out as the same tissue called a gonadal ridge. And based on your hormones, your gonadal ridge can either become ovaries or testicles. Not determined by chromosomes, determined by hormones that are then controlled by chromosomes, but not absolutely. So, if your gonadal ridge is told to become testicles, then you get testicles, but they're way high up in your abdomen, so they have to then descend, because if they don't descend, they'll be too hot. And if they're too hot, you can't produce sperm that are movable, motile, and you'll be infertile. So they have to descend. And they descend about like 2 to 3 months before you're born. They're descending about 7 to 9 months, they're finally fully descending, starting to descend about 12 weeks in development, fully descending later on. And what will happen as they descend is there is this fibromuscular, like little tendon called a gubernaculum that goes from your scrotum up to your testicle, and it pulls it down. And when it pulls it down, it has to pull your testicle through an opening in your abdominal wall called your inguinal canal. The testicle moves through the inguinal canal into the scrotum, and when it does that, some of your peritoneum comes along with it. And so you end up with a tiny, tiny little peritoneum inside the scrotum. Because these testicles make it through this hole called the inguinal canal, that means guys always have a weaker area of our abdominal wall. So when guys herniate, they almost always herniate out their inguinal canal. So really quickly, so let's just look at what this looks like. So, it's too high up for this top one. So here's approximately 8 weeks. At this point in time, your testicles barely start to become testicles at 5 weeks after fertilization. Before that, they're fully bipotential. They start to become testicles at 5 weeks. Then, by 8 weeks, they're really fully becoming testicles. Still slightly bipotential, but not fully. And then what's happening is now at 12 weeks, you have developing testicles, and they start to get pulled down by the gubernaculum. And when you pull the testicles down through the gubernaculum, or by the gubernaculum through the inguinal canal, some peritoneum comes along with it. So that trapped peritoneum becomes the tunica vaginalis, a little peritoneal sac outside the tunica albuginea, and this tunica vaginalis is the only thing protecting the guy's testicles from physical impact. And so really what a guy has to do is use behavior to protect the testicles. And then there's an issue now. So you're an adult, you have descended testicle in your tunica vaginalis, a little bit of peritoneum, but now you have a weaker inguinal canal. So the worst thing that guys in middle school have to go through, you have to do like every year in middle school, at least once a year, if you're in sports, is you have to go to the doctor, and what the doctors do is they stick their fingers behind your scrotum, stick them as deep in there as they can, and even it gets to the point where it's uncomfortable, and then you turn your head and cough. If you have a hernia, it's most likely going to come out through there, and the doctors can feel your intestines touching their fingers. That means you have a hernia. If you don't have a hernia, then they don't feel it touching there. So, It's not a pleasant thing for guys to go through in middle school. Okay. If they don't descend, you have kyphtorchidism. That's a failure of either one or both testicles to descend. If one descends and the other doesn't, the guy's okay. Because both testicles will produce normal levels of testosterone, and as long as one descends, he can still be fertile. If both don't descend, if they both fail to descend, you'll still have normal levels of testosterone production, but what you won't have is fertile sperm production. They won't be motile or movable. And so normally when you have cryptorchidism, they surgically correct it within the first couple months of life. You can just go in and pull it down into there. But if you have one that's descended, sometimes the parents choose not to correct it, because there's always complications whenever you do any sort of surgery, potential complications. So that is it. Now we're on to a big topic here that's a great time to stop, actually.